The deadline Trump gave Putin to stop the war in Ukraine is running out. So, should we expect the announcement of new sanctions against Russia? We'll cover these in the TCH summary broadcast. I'm Solomia Vidlitska. United News continues on 1+1 channel. A seriously wounded woman who was hit by Russian shelling in downtown Kherson earlier today has died in the hospital. Today, the occupiers also attacked a 13-year-old boy on a street with a drone. The teenager was hospitalized with blast injuries and wounds. 2 more people suffered blast injuries in the suburbs of Kherson. In Kupiansk, Kharkiv region, the number of victims due to the enemy has risen to 4, according to the regional prosecutor's office. In the morning, a 70-year-old woman was injured. Then, an enemy drone attacked 2 more city residents. 1 man was also injured as a result of Russian shelling with MLRS. 4 people were wounded as a result of shelling in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The occupiers struck 40 times in one day at the Nikopol and Sinelnikov districts of the region. Private houses and cars were damaged. 7 people were injured in Druzhkivka, Donetsk region. The enemy shelled the private sector with Smert Shanalars. Konstantinivka, Dobropilia, and Shandry-Holov also came under Russian shelling. There, 1 person was wounded in each location. Russian troops launched missile strikes on the Serodinavita community in the Sumy region. There, 2 people were injured. In Sumy, a local resident was wounded during a nighttime drone attack. A large-scale fire was extinguished in Shaska. Several apartment buildings were damaged. The enemy struck the Kiev region. As a result of a massive drone attack in the Bucha district, 3 women were affected. They're experiencing acute stress reactions. More than 20 private houses, outbuildings, and cars were damaged. The house of well-known restaurateur Margarita Zichker was also affected. She herself reported this on social media and showed shocking footage of the aftermath of the Russian Shahid attack. TSN correspondent Yulia Kuryenko is working at the site of the strike. So now we have the opportunity to talk live. Hello, Yulia. So tell us, how is Bucha recovering after yet another attack? What is happening at the scene and how are the victims feeling?
Hello, Solomia. Yes, we are now on one of the streets in Bucha where Russian drones struck last night. You can see that behind me is nothing but a charred ruin. Just yesterday, there was a garage here with Mr. Yuri's belongings, an 86-year-old man who lived in this house. Look at what the blast wave turned it into. The roof is completely destroyed. The man was in the far room. That's what saved his life. And already during the day, you can see that the roof has been covered with plastic and members of the local territorial defense are clearing the debris. The guys came to help. Machinery also arrived to clear out everything that was left of the man's belongings. On this very street, at least 7 houses were damaged. And there is no doubt that it was really a Russian drone because here you can see a fragment from it and it says Garin 2. We found it right here in this yard when we arrived to film. In fact, this was the epicenter of the strike, and this fragment was lying here as proof that it was indeed done by a Russian drone. Now, please listen to the direct account of how a man was sleeping at night and woke up when it hit here, and his whole yard was on fire.
I was sleeping. I woke up. It was burning. What am I supposed to do? I looked around. It was smoldering here, smoldering there. Well, I went outside. It got hot. What disappeared? Everything. Everything. Absolutely. There were enemy tools worth $1 million.
The house?
Well, the house is whatever. It's old. It's about time for it anyway.
Actually, Mr. Yuri's family was here during the occupation of Bucha. They didn't manage to leave. And all this time, they lived next door to a Russian self-propelled artillery unit that parked here and shelled the area. Actually, Mr. Yuri's daughter's husband also went to defend Ukraine back then and, unfortunately, was killed. And now, as you can see, even after Bucha was deoccupied, the Russians still managed to hit this homestead with drones. Let's listen to a direct quote.
The self-propelled artillery was stationed just 3 houses away from us. The SPG was there. Well, yes, about 4 houses away. And all of that was flying right over us. My husband was killed on March 3rd. On March 3rd, he turned 61. That very same day, he immediately joined the territorial defense, signed up.
In fact, this yard was hit more than once, as the local residents themselves say, because the blast wave not only destroyed Mr. Yuri's homestead, but also partially damaged the house and yard of his neighbor Yana. She has a lot of animals, and when she woke up from glass falling on her, with dirt flying in through the window, she also ran to save her dog from the aftermath of the strike. But unfortunately, she wasn't able to save all the animals. Listen to what the woman had to say.
Life, Chip. He was sleeping with me. He got buried too. Nina Hova is over there in the carrier. 2 parrots, 2 squirrels. The rat is there. The hamsters died.
They died?
Yeah. They were scared. Their hearts couldn't take it.
Actually, Yana herself was cut by shards of glass from the window that was hit by the blast wave. But even so, the woman is still cleaning up here on her property today. Neighbors also joined in here to help sort out what's left of people's property. And, in fact, volunteers also got involved, providing plastic sheeting and boarding up the windows and doors. In fact, there's still a lot of work to do here, as you can see, because all of this was caused by Russian shahids, and at least 7 houses here were damaged by them. And nearby, there's also an unfinished multi-story building where people had just bought their apartments, but now they won't be able to live there for quite some time because the blast blew out the windows, doors, and in some places, even the walls. But fortunately, there are no serious injuries here, except that people have lost their property, of course. And the work to clear the rubble is still ongoing here in Soledar.
Thank you, Yulia. TSN correspondent Yulia Kirienko was live with us just now. She is working at the site of the strikes in the city of Bucha and told us how the city and the victims are recovering after the Shahid drone attack. Almost 80 combat clashes have been recorded on the front since the beginning of the day. One of the most difficult areas is the Pokrovsk direction. The Russians are not giving up attempts to block the Pokrovsk-Myrnograd agglomeration in order to lay siege to Pokrovsk. On this section, units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces have repelled 24 enemy assaults since the beginning of the day. In the Pridniprovsk area, the enemy made 6 unsuccessful attempts to advance on that section. The Russians also attacked Alhivka from the air. In the North Slobozansky and Kursk directions, the occupiers are actively using aviation, in particular dropping 12 guided bombs and shelling with artillery. Things are also heating up in the Lyman direction. There, since the beginning of the day, the enemy has tried to storm our troops' positions 14 times. 5 clashes are still ongoing. According to the analytical portal Deep State, the enemy has advanced in the Serebryansk forestry, Zelenyi High, and near Dakhny in the Dnipropetrovsk region. And there, they emphasize, the information about the occupation of the village of Dakhny, which some media outlets are spreading, does not correspond to reality. The enemy is only trying to get closer to the settlement, but our troops are not allowing them to gain a foothold. And in Pokrovsk, in the Donetsk region, the humanitarian situation is critical. There are still more than 2,000 civilians in the community and 1,300 in the city itself. This was reported on the air of the telethon by the deputy head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, Yuri Vinokirov. There is only one store operating in the city. No new food is being delivered. They are selling off old stocks. There is no water or electricity, and the containers with drinking water that were in the city have been damaged by enemy attacks. It is practically impossible to bring food and other necessities into Pokrovsk, and evacuating people is becoming more dangerous with each passing day. The roads are under constant shelling, so now only the military can evacuate civilians who want to leave, Yuri Vinokirov noted. The Russians have started moving equipment to Belarus to take part in joint exercises. This was reported by the spokesperson of the State Border Guard Service, Andriy Demchenko. Ukraine is closely monitoring the situation. However, they consider this more of an information campaign by the enemy than a real threat. There is currently no significant contingent of Russian troops on the territory of Belarus. Despite this, all our units in this area remain on constant alert for any developments, added Andriy Demchenko. The holding of the West 2025 exercises. Russia and Belarus are planning them for September. NATO has previously stated that they are closely monitoring the situation. Similar maneuvers were conducted by the aggressor country and its accomplice on the eve of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. However, the current ones are supposedly going to be much smaller in scale. At least, that's what the president of Lithuania claimed. Today marks the deadline for the ultimatum that the president of the United States gave to Putin: a ceasefire in Ukraine or the imposition of sanctions, specifically secondary tariffs for countries. First and foremost, this concerns China and India, which remain the largest consumers of Russian oil. At the same time, preparations are underway for a personal meeting between the presidents of the U.S. and Russia, which could take place as early as next week. And we'll be discussing all of this live with TSN's own correspondent in the U.S., Ol Koshelenko. She's joining us right now from Washington. So welcome, Ol. Let's start with the sanctions. Will they be imposed? Will they not? Or have they been postponed until after the meeting with Putin? Tell us everything you know.
Hello, colleague. Donald Trump himself, who seems to enjoy being so unexpected and unpredictable, isn't giving a direct answer to this question. And when he was asked the day before in the Oval Office whether the deadline for Vladimir Putin still stands or if anything has changed in that regard, he said that first, we need to hear what Putin has to say. After all, it's no longer a secret that their personal meeting is being prepared, and obviously, it will take place as soon as next week. At the same time, Fox News, which has very strong sources in the White House, reports that despite this, sanctions against countries that buy Russian oil will be announced, and they will be announced today. And as an argument, it is stated that Trump is very disappointed with Putin. Supposedly, at first he genuinely hoped that Putin would meet him halfway on the issue of ending the war in Ukraine. But things didn't turn out as expected. And eventually, it became clear that Putin was actually deceiving him, saying one thing and doing another. That's why there will be sanctions. And this very same information, that sanctions could be imposed as early as today, also citing sources in Donald Trump's administration, is being reported by the British TV channel Sky News. And let's listen to what Trump himself had to say about this the day before.
Is your deadline for Putin still in effect, or has something changed? We know what he'll say. That depends on him. Very disappointed.
The White House is not specifying exactly what the sanctions will be. It is known that secondary tariffs are being considered for countries that buy Russian oil. By the way, regarding India, which is the world's second largest consumer of Russian oil after China, Trump has already signed the sanctions, and they are set to take effect in just under 3 weeks, amounting to 50%. CNN also reports that sanctions against the shadow fleet transporting Russian oil are being considered as an option. So, Alia, today we'll be watching closely and waiting to see if the sanctions will be announced today, right before the meeting with Putin.
And by the way, Alia, speaking of the meeting itself, Trump and Putin are supposed to meet next week. At least that's what the White House is saying. So, what details are already known?
So, for now we can only talk about versions put forward by the press, citing sources. Yes, Trump confirms that he is ready to meet with Putin, as he says, to stop the killings. But there is still no specific date or location yet. Fox News, citing sources, says that this meeting is most likely to take place at the end of next week, and while the location is still unknown, Hungary, Switzerland, the Italian capital Rome, and the United Arab Emirates are being considered. Sky News also reports that Trump recently discussed with the Italian Prime Minister the possibility of holding a meeting with Putin in Rome, or more precisely, in the Vatican. But as is well known, Putin is subject to an arrest warrant in countries that are members of the International Criminal Court. So it's unlikely he would choose any of those countries. Similarly, there are reports in the press about what exactly might become the subject of the agreement, since it's clear that by the time of the negotiations, some concrete decision must already be prepared for the presidents to discuss. And for now, there are various versions. The latest report, according to Bloomberg, is that a certain document is being prepared about freezing the war more or less along the front line. But the agreement, they say, is still very raw and it's too early to talk about anything concrete. At the same time, Fox News reports that the meeting might not happen at all, because Ukraine's President Zelensky has once again confirmed to the Trump administration that he is not going to make any territorial concessions to Russia. He says that this would contradict our constitution. And I want to tell you more about the preparations for this meeting and all the main trends in the following report. The anticipation of the Trump-Putin meeting is being fueled most actively in the Kremlin. After the visit of the U.S. Special Representative Steve Witkoff to Moscow, Western media were the first to report on the possibility of one-on-one talks, citing their sources. They claim that Donald Trump himself allegedly told Western leaders and the president of Ukraine about this during a group call on Wednesday. But at the official level, Washington has not confirmed this. President Trump only said that the chances for a meeting are good. Meanwhile, Russian officials, including Putin's advisor Ushakov and Special Representative Dmitriev, were quick to report that the meeting could take place in the coming days. Putin, when asked about negotiations next week, nods affirmatively and suggests that the United Arab Emirates could be the venue. The main emphasis is that the desire to meet was mutual.
Interest was shown by both sides. Who said the first word doesn't matter?
But there is less enthusiasm for this meeting from the American side, at least publicly. The New York Post even reported that Trump is supposedly willing to talk to Putin if he also talks to Zelensky. The Russian dictator once again dismissed such a possibility the day before. He says that certain preconditions are needed, and they are still a long way off.
For the meeting to take place, Putin has to meet with Zelensky, a White House representative told the Post. The location of the meeting has not yet been determined.
However, Trump himself later denied making such a demand of Putin.
Does Putin have to meet with Zelensky for you to meet with Putin?
No, he would very much like to meet with me personally, and I will do absolutely everything I possibly can to stop these terrible killings.
What exactly Putin promised Special Envoy Witkoff during their meeting on Wednesday, which led Trump to announce significant progress in the negotiations, remains unknown. This week, Bloomberg published information about a possible air ceasefire, which would generally benefit Putin. He is supposedly ready to stop terrorizing Ukrainian cities with drones and missiles, which have no military value, if Kiev refrains from launching its own drones at Russian factories and oil refineries that serve the military-industrial complex. The Polish outlet Onet reports, Witkoff allegedly came with a proposal to Putin to cease fire in exchange for recognition of the occupied territories and to postpone the issue for 49 or 99 years. As a result, the Kremlin would get rid of most sanctions and, in the long run, return to the energy market. No matter what versions appear in the information space, the president of Ukraine, drawing on his experience, commented on the negotiation process this week with restraint and consistently emphasized the awareness and involvement of the President of the United States.
Of course, everyone knows for sure that all key decisions in Russia are made by one person, and that this person is afraid of sanctions from the United States of America and, quite rightly, does not want Ukraine to be a participant in the negotiations.
Another factor is that Putin does not want European leaders to take part in the negotiations either. But now, pushing them out of the negotiation process is not so easy. Since the United States stopped supplying weapons to Ukraine for free, European Union countries have been buying them for us from Washington. Just this week, it became known about a contract between the US and the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark worth over $1 billion. The president of Ukraine spoke with partners by phone the day before and coordinated efforts.
Everyone is united by the understanding that Russia's war against Ukraine is a war in Europe and against Europe. All the decisions that will be made to end this war and to guarantee security truly concern all of Europe, not just one country. That is why Europe's voice must influence the process, and we are coordinating with our European leaders regarding our talks and meetings to align all positions. Also, regarding the work each of us does with other leaders, so that Europe's positions are protected.
Meanwhile, today Trump's ultimatum expires. On August 8th, he promised to impose secondary sanctions against countries that buy Russian oil. Axios reports that European leaders were left bewildered after their conversation with the US president on Wednesday. They still didn't understand whether his intentions regarding tariffs for India and China are still relevant.
Is your deadline for Putin still in effect, or has something changed? We'll see what he says. It's up to him. Very disappointed.
Trump has already ordered the introduction of tariffs and penalties for India, which is reselling Russian oil. They are set to take effect in 3 weeks and will reach 50%. China, which is the largest buyer of Russian energy resources, hasn't been touched yet.
We're sending a ton of dollars overseas to India to buy their products under unfair trade conditions. India then uses American dollars to buy Russian oil, and Russia uses the American dollars coming from India to fund its weapons, to kill Ukrainians, and then American taxpayers are asked to pay for weapons to protect Ukraine from Russian weapons that were paid for with American dollars coming from India. This needs to stop.
Trump himself seems to have gotten a taste for keeping up the tension through uncertainty and threats. The period of declarations and public tempting offers to Putin is over, but the time for decisive action has not yet come. From Washington, United States, Ol Koshelenko, Maxim Shinkarenko, TSN, 1+1, Marathon, United News.
Armenia and Azerbaijan may sign a peace agreement today at a meeting in the White House. It is supposed to put an end to decades of conflict between the two countries. Ilham Aliyev and Nikol Pashinyan will be received by U.S. President Donald Trump, and it is Washington that has acted as a mediator between them, effectively sidelining Moscow from the negotiation process. Many leaders have tried to put an end to the war, but without success. Until now, thanks to Trump. At least that's what Trump wrote on the social network Truth Social. Also, the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan are expected to sign an agreement today with the United States on the economic development of the South Caucasus. In particular, this could create the conditions for opening the strategic Zengezur transport corridor, which has been closed since the early 90s. In the agreement, it will be called the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. They want to run a railway line, oil and gas pipelines, as well as fiber optic lines along this route, and allow the movement of goods and later, people. Strange calls from the Russian dictator. Amid President Trump's deadline for a peace agreement with Ukraine, Putin called several allies at once. According to Russian media, the Kremlin leader called the heads of China, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Belarus. And here's what is being reported about these conversations. Xi Jinping welcomed the support for dialogue between Moscow and Washington. He also expressed his readiness to facilitate a peaceful resolution of current international issues and discussed bilateral relations with Putin. The leaders of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan supported diplomatic efforts to resolve the war. Meanwhile, the Belarusian dictator Lukashenko once again offered Minsk as a venue for trilateral talks between Putin, Donald Trump, and Volodymyr Zelensky. And we have good news from the main intelligence directorate. They reported 2 successful operations against Russian military forces in the Krasnodar region. The intelligence officers attacked a military unit, reporting at least 12 enemy soldiers killed and dozens wounded from the aggressor country. Meanwhile, in temporarily occupied Crimea, combat drones from the intelligence special unit Primary struck one of the most valuable radar stations of the Russian army, known as 98L6 Yenisei. It can be part of the Russian Promety or Triumph anti-aircraft missile systems. As a result, the occupiers' air defense capabilities on the Ukrainian peninsula have been reduced. A rescue operation right before the enemy's eyes. Under heavy enemy fire a year and a half ago, in February 2024, between Verbov and Robotyne in Zaporizhia, a Muscovite missile hit a Ukrainian Mi-17 helicopter of the 11th Separate Army Aviation Brigade. The aircraft went down closest to the positions of the Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance troops from the 118th Mechanized Brigade. There was no time to think or hesitate, the soldiers assure. Despite the continuous explosions of Russian shells, mines, and glide bombs, the drone operators rushed to rescue the helicopter crew. The soldiers of the 118th Brigade are still carrying out missions on the Orkhov Tokmak section of the front, and they desperately need drones for round-the-clock operations. The QR code on your screens during the report is specifically for raising funds for them. So if you can, don't stand aside. Let's all pitch in together to help our defenders effectively destroy the enemy.
They hit with the 82 millimeters mortar, the 120 millimeters mortar. The barrel hit, and they dropped things on us.
On February 24th, in the steppes of Zaporizhia at the Robotyne salient, the artillery barrage was non-stop, and Ukrainian helicopters, in order to support our infantry, came up almost point-blank to enemy positions.
2 helicopters were working. On the way back, we didn't even hear how one of the helicopters went down, because there's always either small arms or mortars firing at us.
Dentist, a reconnaissance drone pilot from the 118th Mechanized Brigade, was just bringing his Mavic back from Robotyne after another mission when he spotted a burning Ukrainian helicopter on the ground.
I saw a lot of smoke. I flew closer. It was our heli, a helicopter that had been shot down. I zoomed in, flew closer. There were 2 pilots lying there. Here, it looks like a body. 2 of them, 2. Yes, we see them. One is Kia, the other is WIA. We made the decision, we had to go for evacuation because I saw one of the pilots moving. He was alive.
He walked out on his own 2 feet, and not just once on the Robotyne salient, every field and every tree line. The chief sergeant of the 118th Brigade and a close friend of Dentist admits the rescue operation could very well have been a one-way trip.
If they are wounded, if they've taken out a position or shot down a drone, they wait for the evac. They won't finish them off. They wait for the evac, and then when the evac comes in, that's when they start shelling everyone. You need to have character. You need to have strength and courage to go in there knowingly when it's 50-50 whether you'll make it back.
Fully aware of all the risks, 2 groups of fighters from the 118th simultaneously ran toward the helicopter wreckage because they had spotted at least 2 crew members on the ground.
I'll be honest, it was scary. It was open terrain, no trees, nothing. And then the shelling started. We dropped down, got up, dropped down, got up.
They tried to reach the Mi-17 as fast as possible, Dentist recalls, because it was unclear from the air what condition the crew was in, and every second could be decisive.
The first guys grabbed the young man. He was still moving and was helping with one leg. And they went first. We loaded the second, the seriously wounded one, onto a stretcher and started to carry him out. But it was really muddy, and the wheels kept getting stuck. We couldn't get him out. So we decided to carry him out by hand. We had just lifted him up, and I could already hear the outgoing fire. Well, we already understood that they were going to target us.
At some point, after covering most of the way to the shelter, Dentist and his comrade realized they had no strength left. They needed help.
I ran to get help. Well, ran is a bit of an exaggeration. I saw a little crater, fell into it, spotted a shell hole from a KAB, crawled in, and made my way to the dugout. And about 30 seconds later, something hit the dugout directly.
Dentist's comrades found him and dug him out as soon as the shelling stopped. At that time, the flight engineer of the Mi-17, Captain Alexander Bykov, was already being transported to a rear stabilization point. The helicopter crew commander, Major Vadim Pakateyev, was severely wounded and did not survive during the evacuation. The operation to evaluate the helicopter's pilot-navigator, Captain Sivolod Ivansov, who died instantly at the moment the aircraft crashed, was prepared by his comrades for over a month.
It doesn't matter which unit a comrade is from, we don't leave our own behind.
And that was no less of a difficult mission, again under constant enemy fire.
There were 3 of US who went, me, the Frenchman, and 33rd. And right along the path, it was clear as day, a plane flew in at us and dropped 2 KABs. It's about to get really loud. It just fell. You could see it. Bang, bang.
To lift the debris that had trapped Captain Ivasov's body, the aviation rescuers of the 11th Army Aviation Brigade, together with Ivanovich, carried heavy tools for more than 3 kilometers to the crash site.
Somewhere around here. We'll move it into this very spot.
To free the body of their fallen comrade from under the wreckage, the soldiers worked right in the open field under enemy fire for many hours straight.
Looks like aviation hit Barcelona. Serhiy found it. Serhiy unpack it.
We needed both a jack and a pry bar. All the work took us about 6 to 8 hours out in the open field. The guys did great. Even though they're ranked as major and lieutenant colonel, they still went after their comrade.
Taking a huge risk, but in the end, from the crash site of the Mi-17, the Ukrainian soldiers managed to recover all of their own. From the southern section of the front in Zaporizhia, Alexander Motorny, Alexander Shayin, and Vitaly Ovsyannikov. TSN 1+1, United News Marathon.